Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining the Endgame podcast. This is Robert, and we wanted to just follow up on what we talked about earlier this week about human trafficking and the dangers and the risks to children. So, I have a close friend that I serve with. Elizabeth Wright works down in San Diego at Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, and she referred a great resource and a great book to me, and I've read it, and it's a phenomenal book read. The author is Gavin DeBecker, and he wrote a book, Protecting the Gift, Keeping Our Children and Teenagers Safe. And this guy is a security expert who's provided guidance directly to the Supreme Court, to Congress, and he's also worked directly with Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, who's clearly a billionaire and probably has security concerns. And that kind of culminated after some of his private texts between him and his then girlfriend kind of got published, and he was hacked. So he tried to figure out how best way to mitigate those risks and make sure that he's keeping himself safe because he is highly vulnerable. But what can be more vulnerable than our greatest gift of all, and that's our children? So I read through this book. I learned a lot of different things about, some threat assessments and some considerations and some things that we're doing right as parents, and some things that I go, man, maybe I've been doing this wrong based on his expertise and his training, and said, you know what, this is something that I probably want to share with other people that have children, or maybe one day you will have children, or you're responsible for people's children. A lot of times we have caretakers that do not have children themselves, and the highest responsibility anyone can ever probably give to you is the responsibility to take care of their child. So in terms of an abduction, the statistically, it's probably never going to happen to your kid. There's a greater statistic of them actually having a heart attack, which most people never talk about. However, it kind of goes back to a common theme, is that if it happens to you, then it doesn't matter what the statistics are. So what can we do to mitigate that? So that's pretty important. So uh, the reality is these kids are at high risk. The data will show that by the time a young person becomes an adult, that 1 out of 3 girls have been inappropriately touched by an adult sexually. And for boys, that's 1 out of 6 will be inappropriately touched by the time they become an adult. And that's huge. That is very astounding. That's 33%, a little bit over 16% for the males. And how do we stop that? We use these terms. Don't do that because there's a lot of bad people out there, and don't do that because strangers are bad. And the data shows a little bit something different. If your child is inappropriately touched or molested, it's generally not by a complete random stranger. Statistically, it's by somebody that's in the home, someone that has access to the home, or someone that spends a considerable amount of time with your children. And when you break down the level of educators, after school programs, you can kind of just go to how many people uh, are in your child's circle for whatever reason. And unfortunately, these child predators, the data will show that by the time a and the statistics say that the majority of the people that will do this to a child are heterosexual males. So you'll hear the rhetoric, well, I don't want my children around X demographic because they feel they're vulnerable. The reality is the people that you would probably try to say based on culture and assimilation. Oh, that's a normal person there. That person, teaches soccer to my kids, or they're Boy Scout troop leader, whatever the case may be. The data shows that, and nothing's emphatic, but all the data currently will show that 100% of those that are going to be touched inappropriately are going to be heterosexual males, and they're going to groom and they're going to come after your child. And it's important that we have that difficult conversation with them, and we kind of change the language a little bit based on the data, from bad people to anybody that does something they're not supposed to. And you got to have that hard talk with your kids, and you really got to display to them that they can tell you anything without fear of reprisal, fear of being angry. And I learned a good tip from somebody in law enforcement, to say, don't tell your kids what you would do if that were to ever happen to them, because the kids are real smart. They're going to make the leap to say, well, if I tell my mom or dad this, my mom or dad may go do that, and as a result of that, I may lose my mom or dad for whatever reason, or they'll be upset with me. So we got to be very, very careful in our language, what we share with our children, because it's very, 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 very important. So What we want to do is we want to teach them to identify dangerous situations, right? Someone that's following them that's not supposed to be there, someone who's just trying to make continual conversation that really has no business making that conversation, or someone around the home that says, "Hey, let's go to the back of the house. Hey, just come with me to my car real quick." Those situations that aren't right for an adult to be with a child alone. Your child, you need to teach them to be able to say no. You need to teach them to be able to come share that with you, because it's huge. The the intuition that a mother has, that a father has, and I'll say more so a mother. That intuition, um, what an intuition that a mother has for safety or for a dangerous threat for her child is basically legitimate with the absence of facts. But if you follow that instinct, you'll never get to the point to illustrate why you thought it was dangerous. Are there times when you're going to get in an elevator with your daughter or your son and you see someone in there, predominantly a male, and you get that funny feeling like, I shouldn't go in there, I don't want to go in there, but then you force yourself to go in there anyway, and the moment you step in there and close the door, you immediately regret it, and many of the times nothing will happen. Well, when you ignore that intuition, you're ignoring the facts. The facts are you don't feel good about it. It doesn't mean that something's bad is going to happen, but why would you do that? You would take your child into an elevator, into basically a steel box that's soundproof, with someone that you don't feel is appropriate to be around. That red flag that you feel as a mother, you need to follow that. And you need to always heed to that intuition, because that will never steer you wrong. So, what's the worst that could happen if you don't get on that elevator? You offend a complete stranger that you probably will never see again. If we turn that on the other side and you go in there and you regret it, and the very thing that you didn't want to go in there for happens, then you have to contend with not only the danger, the risk, but then the associated guilt that may never ever leave if there's a continual bad outcome between you and that individual, or God, something bad happens to your daughter or your son. So you're never going to want to live off that. So it's better to follow that intuition. It's huge. Some of the techniques and strategies you do when these people try to come up to you and befriend you, oh, I have a son or a daughter the same age, or they kind of just try to get into your business and try to assimilate and go, oh, I know exactly what it's like to try to shop with two kids. I have two kids too, and I just went through this morning. They're always going to try to like build a rapport with you, or they'll say, oh, they got a good sale over here on the cereal. If you want, I can walk over there with your kids and help them pick a cereal. You're like, who randomly asked for that? And a lot of times, parents don't want to be rude, and they don't know how to say no. And you have to learn. And you have to be confident in yourself, because these people, these predators, they're looking for the crease, because the data will show that they were probably molested or touched inappropriately themselves, and they know how to identify it. It's that introverted child. It's that child that doesn't really fit in a lot of times, and they know they can kind of get them away from the group. So children that show a lot of resiliency, that are kind of gregarious, that are outgoing, that are confident. What they're looking for is a non-confident child. So we can't stress enough how important it is to teach your child to be confident in themselves, confident in their skin, and to be able to say no when they need to. You really can't really overstate that. When you're selecting daycare, or you're selecting a nanny, you're selecting a babysitter, you got to lay out your expectations, what you expect. If you're going to get a teenage babysitter, are they going to have a boyfriend over the house? Are they going to be on their phone continuously and not watching their kid? Do you trust them that if there's a fire in the home, are they going to do the right thing? And these are things that as a parent, that each family needs to sit down individually and come up with what they think is the best methodology to protect your children. You know, Dominic brought up an example during the podcast with Antoinette that animals on the Serengeti do a greater job than some of the parents do. And what lionesses do, and he shared the story with me, is before they're about to give birth, they prepare a den that's geographically removed from the lion pride. And as they're about to give birth, they disappear, give birth, and they stay there with their cubs for about 3 months. And the reason they do that, they want them to be a little bit more mobile, be able to follow and keep up with the mother, and be able to communicate with the mother if there's a danger. And that just kind of tells you that there's nature's way being able to protect their offspring. And for you and I and everyone out there that have children or are responsible for children, identifying threats and teaching children to identify threats is very important. You know, if they got to go get help because they get lost, statistically, the data says they should go ask a woman for help. Let your children identify who do you think would be helpful, because kids have a great instinct, especially if you teach them to be resilient and you teach them to be bold about who they are. They'll be able to know if someone doesn't have their attention for the most part. They'll pick the right person, and generally picking a woman. And I'll tell you why. If you pick a woman and say, I lost my mom and dad, or someone took me and I need you to help me, most women, especially if they're a mother, they're going to stop every single thing they're doing and they're going to make sure they help that child to their best of their ability. Unfortunately, if you go to a male, and people may call this sexist, but it is what it is. If you're in a department store and some little kid says, hey, I lost my mom and dad, there's a propensity that that man may just go, oh, look, that person over there, they work here, go there. Or the man just walks them up to the next register and says, hey, this kid's lost. Can you page for their mom? Whereas a mother or a woman will stay with that child during the entire process until that child, hopefully, God willing, is reunited with their family. So I just wanted to take a quick 10, 15 minutes of your time to kind of share those tips with you. I highly recommend this book. We're not being paid or endorsed by that at all, but Gavin de Becker. It's called Protecting the Gift, Keeping Children and Teenagers Safe. I highly recommend it. The guy is a great resource. He's hugely renowned in security threat assessments, and he's data driven. So he's not going to say, you know, we shouldn't say this because it may offend some males. It is what it is. The data doesn't lie. And if we want to go with the data and we want to do the things that are going to help keep our kids safe, then I think that's probably the best way to go. So with that, I'd like to thank you for the time and the support you provided the end game. Once again, please go into our YouTube page, subscribe, and check out the videos. We're going to be uploading more content. We're going to do kind of an intermediate post during the week. And then, of course, on the weekends that we have things scheduled, you'll see more content coming from Dominic and I. So once again, thank you and God bless.